So hello everyone and welcome to our March Garden Chat with Earthly Delights Native Gardening. I'm Marlene Smith, president of Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay. Located in southern Maryland, Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay is deeply rooted in native plants and cultivating partnerships. We have been described as a fast-moving chapter, connecting people and native plants for a healthy planet through our shared passion to educate, advocate, and collaborate to support the Wild Ones vision of native plants and natural landscapes thriving in every community. Before we hear from our guest speaker this evening, I have a brief introduction to Wild Ones for those who are not familiar with us or new. For those of you new to Wild Ones, we're a national nonprofit membership organization based in Wisconsin that works to connect people and native plants for a healthy planet. There are currently 99 chapters and 46 seedlings across the United States. If you're not a Wild Ones member, I encourage you to join your local chapter. In Maryland, there are 5 chapters, including Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay, Delmarva on the Eastern Shore, Wild Ones Greater Baltimore, Wild Ones Greater Frederick, and Nation's Capital Region. Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay currently has 73 members, which includes 5 businesses and 3 nonprofit members. The mission of Wild Ones is to promote native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action, and comes to life through the grassroots efforts of local Wild Ones chapters like ours. Through a variety of educational programs and resources, Wild Ones shares the simple message that a healthy planet starts with native plants. We inspire change through shared core values, including respecting and inclusion for all. We share evidence-based information to fuel our action and growth. We're excited to have with us tonight Miranda Yourick, Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay Secretary and owner of Earthly Delights Native Gardening. Miranda found her passion for native plants after buying her first home in 2023. Beginning with 0 gardens, she stumbled through the process of creating them and made a ton of mistakes along the way. A chance encounter led her to volunteering at the USGS lab with Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay, where she soaked up as much information as possible about propagating and identifying native plants. Miranda is no stranger to learning scientific names as she holds a PhD in biology, where she studied the genetics of fishes. Miranda has more than a decade of teaching experience in traditional classrooms, community outreach, and hands-on learning. Designing gardens is an exercise in art and science, both of which Miranda is enamored with. She hopes to help create natural spaces that delight the senses while supporting habitat for wildlife. When not gardening, you can find her listening to audiobooks from the science fiction or horror genres, hiking, stopping often to look at everything, or learning innumerable new crafts. One such craft is linocut, which is how she designed her Earthly Delights logo. And Miranda's favorite native plant, wild columbine or Aquilegia canadensis. And with that, Miranda, take it away.
So today, I am really excited to tell you about garden design and how gardens are a mirror for yourself as you're designing them, and also a mirror for the natural world. First of all, this is our mission statement at Earthly Delights, is that a garden should delight the human senses and provide a place for life to thrive. I think these goals are not mutually exclusive concepts, like a lot of traditional gardening, where they're more made for human senses and not as much for the wildlife and other organisms and beings that are on that we share this planet with. So it's our belief that human needs and desires do not have to be at odds with the natural world, and that we can create spaces that cater to human aesthetics and also use native plants to support wildlife. So of course, first, you all probably know a bit about what makes a plant native. Sorry, I was just looking there. But I thought I'd go over it again because I think there's some really important points to make about this. So a native plant is a plant that have evolved and occurs naturally in a specific region, ecosystem, or habitat over a long period without human introduction. And I think the most important thing about what makes a plant native is that these are species that have co-evolved with others in a community over that long period of time, creating relationships between them. This is something we have to remember when we are making decisions about putting plants in our gardens. So, for example, some of these relationships are extremely connected in a way that you cannot separate them. Like this spring beauty bee, they only can take pollen from the spring beauty flower, which is actually flowering right now. We saw a lot of them at Jug Bay this weekend. So that is that kind of tight relationship that you see that only evolves over that long period of time in a specific place. Also, this is ghost pipes. This is actually a plant, and even though it looks like a fungus, it's a parasitic plant. It doesn't need chlorophyll anymore because it actually gets its nutrients from a relationship with a fungus that has a relationship with trees. And so, again, that's that type of really interconnectedness that we see with native species. So, where do we begin with our garden design? Trying to make something that reflects ourselves and also the natural spaces and those relationships. I think nothing that I say today is groundbreaking. These are all things that um, are very well known in garden design, but I think it's important to emphasize them. And the first and most basic thing about starting your garden design is thinking about what brings you joy personally. Um, and that can be a lot of things. People uh, can take inspiration from all sorts of places. Maybe your grandparents' house when you were growing up, you would go visit them and you remember their garden. I remember my grandmother's flower garden. It was expansive and had all these paths and little places that you could sit. And I think about that. Um, Maybe places that you've visited. So maybe you've been somewhere to a beautiful garden and you want to emulate that yourself at home. Maybe you have a certain aesthetic that you like a little bit witchy or a little bit cottage or whatever, um, that you can sort of take some of those elements and put them into your own garden. Maybe you've been to a wild space that can kind of influence you in your decisions. Maybe you have seen pieces of art. I really love garden art. It's one of those things that brings me a lot of joy. Um, or even in film. This is my favorite garden related film, Secret Garden, 1993. I definitely think about some of those elements too sometimes when I'm trying to decide to put things in my own garden. So just a matter of thinking about what are these things that bring you joy. That's simple. And start with that. Maybe list down, all of these things that you like about Monet's garden or the Secret Garden. Try to emulate it. So one other thing I think about is the spectrum of wild to formal. Um, Obviously, those wild spaces that we kind of want to emulate in our gardens by bringing some of those relationships in between native plants species, between native plants and pollinators and things like that, wildlife. Those spaces have certain aesthetics that might be different from what we can achieve in our suburban gardens or urban gardens, um, due to maybe you have an HOA or something. Maybe you just like a more formal garden. That's maybe you've been to Versailles and you like that formal garden kind of look, right? Like that's what you're into. So you can still emulate that with native plants. It's just going to look a little bit different than the wild spaces. So this is a nice example of a garden that's been made to look a lot like a wild space. Um, it's very pleasing, very visually cohesive, but it is a bit wild, right? This might not be something that you could do very well in a small space. This is sort of a good middle ground, I think, an example here, where it's more like naturalistic, we would call this kind of style, where you still have sort of some of the natural movements of plants, but it's in a a little bit more of a contained space, and it's slightly more formal. Um, and then you have sort of like what I would call a formal garden. You have pathways in between, usually like hedges and other things like this. This is actually a native garden that was planted to look like a formal garden. And these are all pictures from Ben Vogt's Prairie Up, either his website or the book, which I use a lot in this presentation. But I like these pictures because it shows you the wild to formal scape of, we have like kind of similar color palettes here, but totally different looks to them. A note on wild spaces here. So, one thing I hear a lot about is when you're trying to make a naturalistic garden, maybe you want to emulate a wild space, right? Um, Unfortunately, the good thing would be like, oh, I can go out hiking and I can go to a meadow, go visit a meadow, I can go visit a forest and see what's growing there, and I can actually like use those species in the right assemblage to mimic that wild space. Especially around here, we have a lot of very disturbed wild spaces. You can see like a lot of our forests look like these three photos here. That's obviously not all of them. There's lots of really beautiful, well-managed wild spaces, but same with meadows. We have a lot of invasive species like the English ivy here on the left, and then the bittersweet and things like that going up the trees. And then on the right is a great example of a woodland that's just been eaten down to the ground by deer. So if you're going out looking for inspiration in these wild spaces, you just have to look a little bit harder, maybe. There are still really good things to look for. But yeah. So another thing I like to think about is sort of listing out what our specific needs and desires are when you're thinking about your own personal garden, your own personal space. Things like color palettes. Do you need a living fence? Maybe you need to not see your neighbor's backyard. Tidiness. Do you have an HOA? Do you have neighbors who might complain? Do you just like that tidier look? Maintenance levels. How much maintenance are you willing to do in the space? Weeding and watering and all of that sort of thing. Stormwater management is obviously a huge thing to think about if you have water pooling or moving through an area. And also, you want to support wildlife. Most of the people who are doing native gardening see that as one of their main goals. So, with that, I think it's then good. We can list out all of our needs and desires that kind of fit our human aesthetic, and then think about what are their needs and desires. So, our wildlife that we want to support, and how can we shape our garden design to meet those needs and desires. So, our wildlife, they need food sources, they need overwintering habitat, they need safe, warm places to hide over the winter. They need host plants so that they can reproduce. Water sources, especially during the hot summers or during the winters when there's not free flowing water. They need nesting habitat, so areas where they can hide in scrub bushes or in wood piles, things like that. And just safety in general. You want your birds to be able to hide if there's a predator, but we do want the predator sometimes to get them. But I'm always worried about my little Carolina wren and make sure she has somewhere to stay. So these are things to really think about. How can we meet these needs for everybody? So if you have gone on this journey, which some of you likely have, you know that there are a lot of native plants. Um, deciding on your style, the conditions, which conditions being sun and water and things like that, and the needs of yourself and wildlife helps narrow down your choices and reduces disappointment when you're getting your plants and making sure that you like how they look, that they have a decent chance of doing well. Disappointment, though, I will say, is always a part of gardening. So, and that's okay. That's just the way it is. So, I'm going to go through a bit of just really basic concepts to think about when designing your garden from nothing. So, uh, we start, I start with mulch. So, you might kill the grass, or you might just put mulch over the grass and in whatever shape that you want. Um, and we will go next to the structural elements. So these are really tall things like trees. And there are also things like paths. Paths are super important. Um, One thing that you don't want to do is just make one big bed without any paths in it. So paths, um, they have multiple different uses. uh, very nice is that they actually determine where you have to determine where you need and or want to walk in your garden. And that's a great first step towards bed placement. So maybe you want to make sure that you can walk straight to your front door or take a little windy path to your front door, or you need to get back to the woodpile or something like that. So thinking about where you want to lay down those paths first can help you decide, well, anywhere that's not a path, we can make into a garden bed. Um, and um, what we can do then is this concept in garden design called garden rooms. You can let the path lead you to a different room in your garden space. So, for example, like the one picture here we're looking at, which is stunning, you can see this path is leading down from the house and leading somewhere else, leading you towards a different space. The rooms don't even have to be actual spaces that are like rooms. They can just be areas that look different from the last place you were just in, kind of leads you through. I always make sure to design small paths into beds for weeding, ones that you wouldn't be able to see from the front of the bed, but once you walk around to the side or something, you can access the middle of your bed because when you have that big old bed, you're not going to be able to get in to weed anything without that path. And one thing about paths aren't just useful for us, they're useful for wildlife because our wildlife is going to be doing things like overwintering in our mulch and in our leaves and things like that, or in our grasses. And paths can become like trails. They're designated stomping areas. So you can use the path and then make sure you leave the rest of it alone for all of the critters. I love paths. They're because they're whimsical and I love whimsical things. You can use stepping stones, you can line them with fences, wood slices. This is very complex. I usually just throw down a wood round and like stepping stones. Stone borders can line your beds to create a path in the negative space. You can use wattle fencing or dead hedge to line the path. Arches create like a beautiful gateway. You know, you're all of a sudden you go through the arch and you're in a different place. And then just grass too. This is my front yard. Especially if you have a partner who's really into grass, which a lot of people have. You can have your gardens and your grass too. But yeah, these are all great examples of things you can do for your paths. They don't just have to be grass. Often, especially in the shade, it's better not to have grass because it's just hard to grow. Okay, so back to our structural elements. We have things like hardscape and decor. Um, can go into that a little bit. So, for decoration, I love decoration because I'm kind of like I said, a little bit whimsical style. And so we have things like trellises. This is a coral honeysuckle vine going up trellis on the front of my house, like little wind chimes, mirror balls, planters. Planters can be like a good way to create some height um, without having a plant that's taller, and also just creating some more texture. Um, Logs. I love logs. This is in my backyard. We got this really awesome log from a person on Facebook Marketplace. And then, of course, like little trinkets and things. These are some thrifted glass mushrooms that I make as some of my art projects. And bird baths are great. Again, this is just thrifted glass on top of a cedar round. This is my bird's favorite bird bath in my yard. They're always in there taking baths. They love it, like really low to the ground. Um, and then rocks too. That's another thing that I love. These I stole from my parents' house in the Piedmont because we don't have any rocks here in the Coastal Plains like this. And just create some really good color and texture differences. And the thing too is that um decorations like, the little mirror balls and all that, right? That's for us. Those are things that make us happy to see them. But a lot of these other things are useful for our wildlife that we're trying to support, our natural world, right? In nature, if you're going into a woodland garden, you're going to see logs all, or into a woodland space, you're going to see logs all over the ground decomposing. And that's creating habitat and, kind of going through the carbon cycle, all these nutrient cycling. So the logs that you have, they might look cool, but also they're habitat for reptiles and amphibians and insects and everything. And also the bird baths, those are they might look nice to us, but they're also useful because our birds and some other pollinators too, you can make baths for. They need water, especially during the summer and the winter. So next, after you do sort of the taller and hardscape elements and things like that, you're going to add your mid-level elements. These are things like large grasses, shrubs, and large herbaceous perennials. Yeah, don't sleep on grasses. I love grasses and everything, especially to balance things out. So imagine this space that we're kind of making here, where it's just shrubs. It would look kind of lumpy. Right now, we have these large grasses next to these kind of lumpier shrubs, and that sort of creates a balance of textures for us to look at. And this is another good place to create that balance, making sure we don't have too much that's heavy on one side, like not having all the really tall stuff on one side, unless for some reason that's what you wanted. But yeah, so those are our mid-level elements. And then next are ground covers. So these are grasses, sedges, and low-lying plants. So you can see here we've added all of our little grasses in at the bottom. And these guys are super important because especially when you're making more naturalistic garden, because they create what we call green mulch. And that is where our grasses cover the ground instead of having to remulch every year, like in sort of traditional gardening practices. Um, so that grass covers the ground, and that way it can suppress weeds from coming up in your garden. It also is creating a filler effect that looks natural. So if you are somebody who wants more natural looking garden, you would want to use a lot of these grasses, these ground covers, because most of the world that we see is green. So that's what makes a garden look natural. Now, if you wanted a very formal garden, you wouldn't be doing something like this. But for most people, this is this is a really good step for them to do. And then, of course, habitat. These low-lying plants, they provide a nice moist habitat against the ground for things like firefly larvae and amphibians to be able to overwinter under. So a note about the ground covers and the ubiquity of green. So this is a quote from Prairie Up by Benjamin Vogt. He says, the first aspect we notice about nature is how green it is and how many plants share the same green hue. It's pleasing, calming, and even ordered. There's a benefit to this green uniformity when we think about color theory. So you can see here we have this space. It's mostly green, but we have pops of color. And that is how most of nature, wild spaces are. They are mostly green. And if we want to make a garden that looks natural, um, we want to make sure that we're doing mostly green and not just all flowers, all flowering at the same time, that sort of thing. Um, this is from Planting in a Post-Wild World by Rainier and West, talking about color ranges of green. This is something I just learned and read about. Uh, They say harmonious ranges of color and texture signal that a planting has evolved with the site for many decades. The slow process of competition and evolution results in a rich relationship of plants to place, producing plants that have similar colors and textures to each other. Some planting feels dissonant to us, and a difference in color and texture is often the cause. So, this is telling us that in certain habitats, the plants that have evolved there over a long period of time often have similar colors of green to each other. And if you think about it, like here we have a grassland, and the green is sort of lighter. There's a little bit of a silvery texture to it, and that's because the plants have evolved coatings on their leaves to help prevent moisture loss. That makes them a little bit lighter green. But if you're doing a garden in a place that's really wet, you have a lot of darker green because the plants have evolved to different sets of conditions. And so, usually, when you're trying to think about colors of green, you want to stick to about like one or two green hues. So, not mixing up too many different dark and light shades of green together because it ends up looking not harmonious, which is something I didn't catch before reading this. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. This is another reason why a lot of like traditional plantings with like lots of different cultivars that you'd find at a garden center, they often look kind of like dissonant and not cohesive. And it's because all the colors of all the leaves are all different and they're very like extreme and all together. And so it just kind of looks jumbled. But yeah, so colors of green. All right, now we're adding our perennials. This is, of course, the most exciting part, is trying to decide what our perennials are to add to a garden. Um, so I'm gonna throw a bunch of different axes at you here of what to think about. This is some of those things like I get overwhelmed too, where I'm like, oh my God, I have to remember that I have to have spring bloomers and fall bloomers and blah blah. Blah. But it'll all get figured out in the end. So you want to have all season interest. This is plants that are blooming in all different seasons, and also plants that look cool in the winter is something. Don't forget about winter. Winter is it can be a very sad time, and you want to be able to look your garden and at least see something kind of cool out there. Okay, we're going to talk about colors. Now, this garden that I have here has, for me personally, too many colors in it for one garden. But of course, they wouldn't be all blooming at the same time. So you can kind of think about that as well. Um, where you can have different color palettes if you want each season, but just some basic color rules. So we're going back to like, I don't, maybe kindergarten, first grade, I don't know. The color wheel here. Um, I would say the most dynamic color pairing that you can have in your garden is purple and yellow. This creates that really high vibrational like color theory like coming out at your eye. It's dazzling to your eye. And it's also dazzling to pollinators. Um, Pollinators visit these flowers that are purple and yellow when they're together more than when they're apart. Um, and then also red and yellow, they're not complementary colors, but they are in like the warm spectrum. And so they look nice together. And then, of course, adding white to any sort of color palette is always okay. I would say it's one of those things where if you have a favorite color, you should use it in your garden and you can use other colors that look good with it. I tend to stay away from red and pink next to each other, blooming at the same time. It just, for me, it looks like red and pink and red and purple together. Not a huge fan of. Orange is also one of those things, like orange would look good in this picture on the right. Not so good with some of the other palettes you can think of. We don't have a lot of blue plants, but that's how it is. We have some that are almost blue. But yeah, so you can kind of play around with this a little bit. Okay. So, negative space is another thing that I was just reading about and super important because for our negative space, we have things like paths. So we've already taken care of that, luckily. All right, we probably have some very specific ecological goals that we want to achieve. So think about who are you excited about supporting with your garden? You can support everybody with your garden, but who are you most excited about? So, for example, we have here cone flowers in my front yard. The goldfinches absolutely go crazy for them. I'm obsessed with it. This was a day when I saw 9 of them on there in the fall. They're just nomming like crazy. And then here we have, oops, there we go. This is hummingbirds visiting the cardinal flower in my rain garden. And I find that most people want to attract hummingbirds to their garden. And that is huge because I mean, I love hummingbirds. I love seeing them eat out of the cone or out of the cardinal flowers instead of out of the little feeders for them. It's just safer for them and it's more natural. So think about who you're excited about bringing in and find plants that are most likely to bring them in. Okay. So in terms of ecological goals, um, I would say the way to maximize any sort of ecological effect you have is to get plants that are in your ecoregion. If you're listening to this talk, you're probably in the Piedmont or the coastal plains of Maryland. And those are regions that just have similar soil types uh, in those regions, and they're different from the region next to it. On plant diversity, um, this is from Prairie Up. A study showed that having just 6 to 16 plant species supports ecosystem function, meaning like kind of like the full spectrum of ecosystem function. The more plants you have from the same ecoregion, the more ecosystem function you have. So you can go and check out some of the links from Prairie Up. There came in the email, and Xerxes and uh, USDA and Bonap and like all of these places, there's a lot of places where you can just put in your ecoregion and find out what plants are the most local to you to maximize that ecosystem function. Okay, now we can think about textures and heights. So what is a texture exactly? It just means different flower and leaf forms. So these can be things like well, grasses should always be the backdrop. If you want to have a naturalistic garden, should always be the backdrop for a more wild look. And then we can kind of layer some other flowers and leaves on top of it. Things like some of these textures or these forms are spires. So like this blue vervain right here is a spire. Clusters like this, maybe it's a bone set or who knows, something like that. Um, Stuff with petals and like classic flower form pom-poms like this monarda, bells like columbine or things like that. Um, Putting these together gives your eye something to focus on at any one period of time as it's looking at the garden. instead of having everything be sort of like the same shape. It's nice for our eye to look at these different shapes and pick them out. This is another great example of using textures, especially because there's not a lot of color in this garden. It's mostly green. You can see how we've used height here too. Have the things in the back that are a little bit taller, have this maybe bottle brush or something, cohosh right here on the left. That's a like kind of a mid-level plant. And you have all these great leaf textures. And you notice too, right? They're kind of all the same greenish color, right? That's all like a nice woodland green. We don't have a lot of standout greens in this. So then we can play a little bit with that leaf texture to create an interesting space. Repetition is super important. We don't want to just have one-off plants all over the place. That is not how plant communities assemble. Um, so having repetition, like in this garden that we saw earlier, creates cohesion. It's just naturally pleasing to the eye. You're going to use clumps and drifts. So you have these clumps of, I don't know what that is in the middle, or there's Bradbury's Monarda here in the front. You're gonna have clumps that repeat, and you're gonna have drifts. So those are like lines of things. Like grasses are really great for making a nice drift, a nice line through a space. Um, you can make a module. So like make a little garden design that's for like a, I don't know, 10 by 10 space. Flip it and repeat it if you have like a larger garden that you can um, kind of make so you don't have to design the entire garden. You can design one piece and then flip it. And that gives you that natural repetition. This is an example of from Prairie Up, from Ben Vogt. Okay. And then sociability. This is the an interesting concept that has definitely been it's been uh, made more important by Ben Vogt, and he's got a lot of great resources on it. So if you want, you can go and check all of that out. This is an interesting concept because the sociability, uh, first of all, sociability is how plants play with others in a community. Sociability is different based on the environment that you're in. If you're in clay soil, if you're in loam, if you're in sand, whatever, plants will play differently in those different environments because of their different root systems and mycorrhizal associations and things like that. And that's something you just kind of have to figure out by yourself. There are plants that are kind of universally play a little bit nicer or don't play so nice, but that might be different in your garden. So it's something to think about, but also not to stress about too much. So the sociability rankings are on a scale of 1 to 4. Um, 1 is a clumper that slowly expands over time. 2 is a light sower, moderate root runner, may create small groups of plants, that sort of thing. Um, you would want to plant these two uh, in spaces together because they can play nice. And then we have 3s, larger masses of plants that develop more quickly. And then 4s, a species that, if given ideal habitat, will dominate other species and perhaps the landscape over time. Um, and you would want to make sure you plant 3s and 4s together so that you don't have 4s overwhelming 2s and 1s and things like that. This is an extremely important thing to think about. You want your plants to get along well so that they can create a stable community that is kind of like low maintenance. It's kind of um, you know, all working together by itself, and you don't have to mess with it too much. So an example here is in my front garden, I have spotted bee balm. So we have a bee balm, anise hyssop. We have brown-eyed Susans. We have what else? There's rough goldenrod. So these are all kind of like 3s and 4s, and I planted them all together because I like them, and also because they can fight with each other and aren't gonna like overwhelm each other like completely. Although I will say the brown-eyed Susans, they might have to go. They're a 4 for sure. They're very serious. So, these are things you learn, right? You plant something, if it starts to take over, you might have to eradicate it, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, so this is something that takes a little bit of time too, and like learning from other gardeners in your area. So yeah, after we've gone through all of these different considerations to how a garden should function and how it should look to sort of please our human eye and also the wildlife that we're trying to support. Um, and it's all about sitting back and watching your garden grow, although obviously not many of us are sitting back. We're usually in there, completely dirty, sweating, not drinking enough water, which we should, and pulling out weeds like crazy. But that's the fun of it, right? So, um, some closing thoughts. It's important to put yourself into the garden design to create that personal connection with your garden. I think there are a lot of people who are really just focused on like, okay, how do I make this garden like support the most wildlife possible? And that's cool and everything, but you want to make sure that you're creating a space that you're always gonna like want to be going out and weeding and messing with and walking through, like making it a space that's inviting for you to walk through. Maybe it goes to your favorite coffee drinking spot, um, and that allows you to interact with your garden more. So making sure you put yourself into that garden design. Um, Plant communities in nature change over time, and your garden will change too. You may even be the one who changes it, and that's fine. But that's more putting yourself into the garden design. I am a habitual plant mover. I'm always moving my plants around, for better or for worse, because I realize I actually didn't like where I put that plant. I'm going to move it, and that's fine. Plants die or disappear. This is okay. It's the heartbreak of gardening, and it's fine. Don't get stuck on perfection, don't get stuck on maximizing the amount of wildlife that you want to help. It's okay because your garden, no matter what, does make a difference to the world around you. No matter if you have 6 species or 16 species or whatever, it doesn't matter. Your garden is doing so much for the world around you, for the wildlife around you, for yourself. Um, and that's what it's about. So don't stress about it. Just enjoy it. And this is a great example. A bunch of like probably a million caterpillars that are at my parents' house, um, on all of their common milkweed. Every little caterpillar is a difference, right? That's being made. So I just want to wrap up here and say that we are Earthly Delights Native Gardening. We're pretty much brand new, family owned business with myself and my parents who are also here on the meeting tonight. You can visit our website, earthlydelightsnativegardening.com. That's the QR code that can send you straight to our website. That's our email address. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You'll see lots of fun pictures of us trying to grow plants because we are starting our own little nursery for our clients. We're taking spring and fall clients right now for anything from just plain old consulting to full design and install. We also do workshops, and I also make nature inspired art. So I'm going to be posting more about that later or soon on in the Instagram and Facebook and everything. So if you're interested in anything like that, you can follow us to keep up with that. And thank you so much. Thank you to Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay. As I like to say, for Marlene and Bill and Misty, this is all your fault. Um, yeah. So thank you for being wonderful mentors on my native plant journey. Yeah.
Miranda, I absolutely was enamored with your presentation. And
Thank you,
I've
Marlene.
decided my garden is wild, witchy, and whimsical.
Yes, it is. I love your garden.
So,
I was in love with it when I visited. Your paths are incredible. I'm a sucker
oh,
for a path. You have great paths.
thank you. Thank you. No, I really was inspired by your presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Miranda?
I really liked the part about the greens. I never thought
Yeah.
about that.
Hmm.
And it makes so much sense that
It
that
does, right?
is more pleasing,
Yeah.
to see. That was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I literally, that was the newest thing I learned from reading
Yeah,
Planting in a Post-Wild World. I was
yeah,
like,
never
oh my
thought of,
God,
and I
that
think I
makes
have the book and
yeah.
maybe I forgot. I don't know.
It's like one page and there's like one picture where it shows
Yeah,
the different color ranges of green for different habitats.
yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to get your website too. And
Yeah.
I wish you, you know, big success.
Thank you. Yes, our
Uh,
greenhouse is arriving tomorrow.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
Hey, Miranda, maybe we can schedule a field trip for
Yeah.
those of us who are interested to carpool up and come see your lovely new greenhouse and all when
Yeah.
everything's in order.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Or
Wonderful.
maybe we could schedule a volunteer day and we'll come help you.
Oh, now you're talking, Marlene.
I'll
Like
do it.
Marlene doesn't have enough work to
No, I
do.
know. She's we'll just feed them, that
Uh,
we're good at that too. So,
yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
does anyone have any other questions or anything?
Did your mom and dad want to pop on and say anything or just introduce themselves?
I don't know. Oh, there's my
Here's
dad.
Jeff.
Hi. Yep,
Oh,
I'm Jeff Yourick. Yeah, thanks, Miranda. Great.
you have a great echo, Dad. You must be sitting right next to Mom.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, that's what happens. They're on their separate phones on this like opposite couches. Marla, did you have a question?
I do. And I apologize for being late. I was out planting bluebells and ferns, and
I
I needed to get them protected.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, gosh. I'm brand new to gardening in Maryland. We
Hmm.
bought this house over the summer. I gardened with natives in California for
Hmm.
30 years, but the rules are all different.
Completely
Everything's
different.
different.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's okay to ask this specific of a question, but I have some I have a yard that gets pretty wet down at the
Hmm.
bottom end near the
Hmm.
alley, and got a bunch of fig buttercup in it now.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking it gets so wet that when we have a heavy rain, I see a puddle for
Yep.
hours. Now,
Yep.
would it be a bad thing if I made that puddle deep enough to be a vernal pond?
I mean, I don't think so. How far is it from your house? Is it pretty far
It's a
from your
long
house?
way. It's
Okay.
probably a good 90 feet from the house, and
Okay. So that's fine. Yeah.
it's right near the storm drain in the alley. So I wouldn't be flooding anybody else's property.
Yeah. I think as long as it's more than 10 feet from your house, you can create some sort of pond. Well, I guess it depends. Yeah, if you want to create a vernal pool that to support amphibians and things like that, you would want a pond that doesn't drain that
Got it.
quickly. So
Okay.
you
Make
would
sure it doesn't.
either
Mhm.
usually you'd have to compact the soil quite a bit or put some sort of liner in, maybe
Right.
like a hard plastic liner.
Got it.
And that way, yeah, because you don't want it to drain too quickly.
That's right.
But
Yeah,
the other side of that is you could create a rain garden, which helps the water penetrate quicker.
that's
And
true.
that would, I mean, it still support plenty we have a rain garden in our backyard and we don't have amphibians reproducing in it, but they do like come visit, when it's
Oh, that's
wet
cool.
and they hang
Well,
out.
what I'm thinking is it's really right in between these two black walnuts. So if I dig much, I could be causing trouble for them.
We have our rain garden goes through some pretty substantial roots of our maple tree. We haven't seen any sort of trouble with it yet.
Okay.
I think if the trees have enough of their roots not being disturbed, it should be okay.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's certainly a great idea. I mean, it's a lot better than just having like a stinky pond hanging out, right? You
Yeah,
might as well use it, right?
yeah, it doesn't stay long enough to be stinky, but I
Oh, that's
really
good.
there are tree frogs one block over.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm like,
They'll
oh,
show up too. Like
Yeah.
frogs, they do.
that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
You have to make mom mute herself. Hold
that's
on.
all right. Never mind. No,
You sure?
the
She's
vernal
muted. She's
pools
muted
do
now.
not have to be that deep.
No, it
Okay.
doesn't.
You can, I've heard that you can even have 6 inches. A lot of people do 1 to 2 feet, but even 2 feet is very deep for a vernal pool,
That's
That is
especially on
deep.
a smaller size pool.
Yeah.
Like if it was probably a foot deep, that would be good as long as it didn't drain.
Okay. So I think I'll look at 6 inches to a foot. The other piece is I have a toddler granddaughter and we watch her like a hawk, but 2 foot scares me anyway. But
Yeah. It's not necessary either.
No.
So, you know,
right.
and you can always
Yeah.
create, like, if you want to create some sort of barrier around it, you can use some of those, like, kind of more whimsical elements, like those little fences with the sticks or something, to make it
Sure.
a cute little fence around it, just so
Right.
it gives you peace of mind, but
Right.
lets the wildlife through.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
it sounds
This has been
fun.
great. I'm looking forward. It's being recorded, right? So I can watch
Yes.
the rest that I missed.
Mhm.
I was trying so hard to finish, but
No, it's
Ivy
okay.
here is amazing, man. Anyway,
Yes. Thank you.
thank you. Looking forward to seeing your place.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
We're scheduling that field
We're
trip.
scheduling a field trip.
All
Anybody
right,
else?
Miranda, if you wouldn't mind stopping your share, I'll
Yep.
finish sharing my screen and go over just a few slides before we let you guys go. Okay, just our chapter updates real quick. So we were very active in advocating for legislation this legislative season, including the Maryland Native Plant Month. I had the pleasure of going up to Annapolis to provide oral testimony both to the Senate and to the House on the Maryland Native Plant Bill. I think the bill is currently stalled for this legislative season, but I haven't heard a final outcome yet. But in the meantime, the governor has signed a proclamation for May of 2026 to be Maryland Native Plant Month. So start thinking about, what you might want to do within your areas for Maryland Native Plant Month in May. It follows the National Native Plant Month, which is in April. This Friday, we're having a screening of The Little Things That Run the World at the College of Southern Maryland La Plata campus. It's a passionate and comprehensive deep dive into the ecological crisis facing flying insects and the ripple effects on global biodiversity. So we welcome anybody to come. This is free. And we plan to have Wild Ones will be there along with Xerces and the Southern Maryland Audubon Society. So we hope we'll have a good time and a good showing there. One of the things we're looking forward to this spring is we were approached by the Good Earth Natural Food Store in Leonardtown to renovate their foundation garden bed. Our chapter member, Amy Henderson, I don't think she's on tonight, but she's leading the project, and we're waiting word on whether or not we'll be chosen to receive a grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust for their maintenance small grants program. That's a pilot program this year where they're focusing on small scale maintenance projects that are specifically designed for invasive plant removal and or planting native replacements or enhancements. So we're going to be removing the lemon balm, which has taken over this bed, and planting a nice native pollinator garden. We have 3 work days coming up, which members or non-members even are encouraged to come help us if they'd like. And I'll go over our volunteer opportunities before we end tonight. Whoops, back one. So at our last meeting in January, we had advertised the Seed Swap Festival that was scheduled in January at the Mount Rainier Nature Center. And unfortunately, due to weather, that got canceled and it's rescheduled for April. So if you're in that area and would like to join us at the Mount Rainier Seed Swap Festival, there's a children's story time, nature craft, and a plant giveaway from 1 to 3 p.m. And we'll be there. I think we'll have our Milkweed for Monarchs display. And in addition to giving out a variety of native seeds, giving out some stratified milkweed seeds to get more milkweed in the ground for the monarchs. And this spring, we're going to try using a new volunteer sign-up form for 2026. We encourage our members or anyone interested to sign up to help us at outreach events. There's no experience necessary. We'll train you on site, or you can join us for garden work days at our various locations. The QR code on this slide will take you to our volunteer form, and we'll also send that out in our newsletter the beginning of April. But lots of opportunities coming up. This is a picture on the upper left-hand corner is from this week in the native garden at the Leonardtown Library. We have quite an interesting group working there. We have Wild Ones, the Friends of St. Clements Bay, the St. Mary's County Garden Club, and University of Maryland Extension Master Gardeners in St. Mary's County. Always looking for volunteers.
Marlene, I just want to add that if you want to learn about garden plants, volunteering for a garden workday is the best bet for learning about whatever plants they're planting or how to plant it or how to design it. Get your hands in the dirt with people who know.
Yep.
How to
That's a great,
recognize the weeds from
that's a great
from
plug,
the
Sue.
native plants.
And
Huge.
yeah, a lot of times at our work days, we may be, I know some of them at the Leonardtown Library especially, will be splitting plants. And actually, if you go to our volunteer form, we'll be splitting plants to pot up for a native plant swap in the spring. But a lot of times, volunteers can go away from the event or from the work day with some plants. So, you know, we try to take care of those who come and help us out. There is a Wild Ones annual meeting scheduled for April 15th at 7 p.m. It's virtual. Unfortunately, I have not been able to get a registration link for this. So keep your eyes open. If you're a Wild Ones member, you should probably get an email from Wild Ones with that information once it's available. And if we get it before we send out our April newsletter, we will include that in the newsletter. But they always go over the accomplishments of the Wild Ones National as a whole, which is pretty interesting to hear. And we're happy to take any questions that you might have, whether it's related to our chapter or just anything gardening in general. Lots of experts on the Zoom meeting here tonight. I want to thank Miranda for her presentation. I really, like I said, I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad to be here. Like I said, Marlene, it's all your fault.
It's all my fault.
It's all your fault.
I hear that from a lot of folks, but that's what makes me happy. I'm always glad to bring someone else, you know,
Yeah, I really
into the
didn't
native
know.
plant arena.
I basically knew nothing before I met you, so
Oh,
you know, you taught me a lot.
oh, well, I'll take that as a compliment, but I think you're being way too generous because I think it goes both ways. I've learned a lot from you too.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So Wild Ones Chesapeake Bay is deeply rooted in natives. I invite you to join the movement to make a difference by becoming a member if you aren't one. Our work depends on you. If you scan the QR code on this page, it'll take you to our links page on our website where you could join, donate, view our calendar, visit our website or social media channels, and much more. We try to keep things pretty up to date on our links and on our website and social media. So unless anybody else has anything, I'm going to stop share. But I appreciate everybody who joined this evening. If somebody could maybe put the link to the review,
Oh,
we
yes,
always
it's in
we
there.
always like to hear how we did, how we can improve our meetings.
Mhm.
Yeah, let us know
Yep.
what you liked, maybe what you didn't like, whatever. And yeah, we appreciate you all joining tonight. And the meeting, as soon as the meeting's over, we'll post it on our website and on our social media.
Mhm.
And we thank you for joining.